Welcome to the Smarter Driver Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Rick August, and here we're going to get you on the road to becoming a safer, smarter driver. And no, my degree is not in driving. My degree, in fact, is in legal history, which many of you know is the study of policing, courts, and prisons. My expertise is in policing as it relates to traffic. Here, we're going to look at the fundamental conflict of traffic, which is collisions versus congestion. And we're going to look at the arena of social driving, the challenges you face as a driver, the challenges you face when getting a license or starting a career as a truck or bus driver. The car's all gassed up, we're ready to go. Let's get started. Hi there, Smart Drivers, talking to you tonight about crashes and the impact that they have on our societies, on our worlds, and the toll that it extracts from our healthcare system, emergency services, and society overall. So we're going to talk about that, the impact it has on you, and how to prevent crashes and make yourself a safer, smarter driver. Lots of good stuff going on here at Smart Drive Test. As you know, we're putting up video shorts every day here on YouTube, over at TikTok, Instagram. So we got all of that going on. If you're new to Smart Drive Test, my name is Rick August. I was a truck driver in the 1990s, drove buses for Greyhound and one of the regional bus lines while I was going to university at the University of Melbourne in Australia. Became a licensed commercial driving instructor in 1997. Earned my doctorate in legal history in 2006, which, as you may or may not know, is the study of policing, courts, and prisons. And my expertise is in policing as it relates to traffic, oddly enough. And I started the Smart Drive Test YouTube channel in 2015, and it has been wildly more successful than I could have imagined. And if you want to know more about me, go over and check out the autobiography over on the Smart Drive Test website. If you want to have a look at this, Spinning Our Wheels, the inability of traffic policy to change driver behavior. This is an academic article that I wrote some years ago stating that driver behavior is not reducing traffic crashes. Essentially, more than a century of traffic policy, traffic laws have not influenced driver behaviors. We have put in all kinds of laws since the late 1960s to try and stem the effects of drink driving, intoxicated driving. And if Tim was here, Tim's not here with Drive Smart BC. He's a retired police officer, and he says that drink driving is still a big problem within the umbrella of traffic safety. We have not put a dent in drink driving. And unfortunately, now it's gotten worse because now we've legalized marijuana, and the incidence of people driving high is adding to the number of people who are driving drunk. And I put a poll up last week, and I put drink driving and driving high together, and many people, I suspect that they are people who partake in marijuana, took great umbrage at the fact that I put those two things together. Oh, was there some vitriol that there was no such thing? The effects of drink driving and the effects of driving high were not the same at all. So have a look at that poll and read some of the comments on that. Okay, so spinning our wheels, the inability of traffic policy to change driver behavior. Since the 1960s, when traffic fatalities were at an all-time high, a record high, and the number of traffic crashes was at an all-time high, this, I would argue, has not changed in the last 50 years. Traffic crash deaths at the beginning of the 1900s, the top three reasons people died in our world was because of war, famine, and disease. 100 years later, the reasons that people died changed to terminal illness, suicide, and traffic crashes. And this, you can see the figure of war here, giving the trophy for killing the most number of people to the automobile. And this is in 1924, and you can see here that 19,000 Americans were killed and 450,000 were injured. And today that number is about 45,000 Americans are killed every year by the motor car and traffic crashes, and about probably 1.5 million are injured and maimed in traffic crashes. So as I said at the outset, that if you took all of the traffic crashes in 1 year and put them in one place at the same time, it would be considered a national emergency. Famous people who have been killed in car crashes, no one absolutely no one is immune to the effects of car crashes. James Dean, who is a famous actor, most famous for Rebel Without a Cause in 1955, and this image here is a copy of his speeding ticket he received 2 hours before he was killed. 1974, Tim Horton, that may not have any significance for people in the United States and other parts of the world, but here in Canada, Tim Hortons is a very famous national coffee shop, and for some of us from the East in Ontario and Quebec, Tim Hortons is next to patriotism. 1997, Princess Diana was killed, and in 2013, Paul Walker was killed. And if you watch the Netflix series Fastest Car, his friend Eric Davies talks about the death of Paul Walker, and there is some irony around the death of Paul Walker because of his starring role in the movie franchise The Fast and the Furious, which romanticized illegal street racing, and Paul Walker dies in a car crash near the end of that franchise. When do the most number of car crashes happen? The most number of car crashes happen in the summertime, often on dry roads in clear weather. The driver is sober. There are some contributing factors that we can discuss and we think are the reasons that people crash. Fatigue, prescription drugs, and over-the-counter medications. And it was interesting, in the poll that I put up about what's the most dangerous kind of driver, very few people thought that prescription medication caused people to be inebriated, which is not true at all. A lot of people who are driving are inebriated because of prescription and over-the-counter medications. Single vehicle collisions, there are a very high number of single vehicle collisions that are inexplicable. Traffic authorities, police, and other people who are invested in traffic safety have very little information about why people crash by themselves. They fall asleep, they're drunk, they're distracted, they are jet lagged for whatever reason. They drive off the road, drive into a fixed object, crash, roll the car. There's a very, very high number of single vehicle crashes where people just drive off the road. So the different types of crashes: head-on crashes, T-bone crashes, rear-end crashes, you get rear-ended, and then sideswipe crashes. So essentially the four sides of your car. Head-on crashes and T-bone crashes are the most lethal of the four types of crashes. Head-ons aren't quite as bad as they once were. Road engineering has prevented a lot of this with interstates and concrete barriers down the center of roadways that are close together, where the two lanes are close together. But we still do have head-on crashes, and these are often fatal. T-bone crashes as well are often fatal, and the severity or the just absolute awfulness of T-bone crashes happens because it's often a couple. It often happens on a left-hand turn. The other car hits the vehicle on the side. There's very little to protect you in the event of a T-bone crash, and they go to the hospital, and the husband was driving and the wife is sitting in the passenger seat, and the husband just killed his wife. So this is the terribleness of, I know that's not a word, but the really severity of T-bone crashes. Rear-end crashes, most people sustain soft tissue damage when they're rear-ended. It's important when you set up your vehicle that you set up the head restraint correctly. The head restraint in the vehicle prevents your head from snapping back. And as well, it should be adjusted so the top of the head restraint is at minimum at the top of your ears. In most vehicles it is, but some just definitely have a check. Sideswipe crashes usually result in just property damage. There's very few injuries, and it's a high likelihood in a sideswipe crash that you're going to survive. And if you have the choice between a sideswipe crash and a head-on crash, pick the sideswipe crash every time. Rural crashes that happen in the country, are often fatal because you don't get emergency attention, you don't get medical attention soon enough. So we know that there are twice the number of crashes in cities as there are in rural settings, but there are twice the number of fatalities in rural settings. And these are the reasons why more people die in crashes in the country, is because the chances of somebody finding you, as I said previously, most of the crashes are single vehicle crashes and there's nobody else around. There's no other passengers in the vehicle. Emergency vehicles have to find you and they have to get to you. It's a lot better now, obviously, with GPS and helicopters and those types of things. But if you're in a rural area, you're on a backcountry road, or here in the mountains where we live, you're on a logging road or those types of things, it's going to be a fair length of time before you receive medical attention. Top 3 reasons for crashes, and most of the traffic authorities who put up the reasons for crashes like to put speeding at the top. And I disagree with that, because if speeding was the number 1 reason for crashes, then we would have more crashes on highways, which is not true. Okay, so I say that the number 1 reason for crashing is failing to yield. And if you want to see some of the comments about this, simply go over to the TikTok Smart Drive Test account and look at the merging video and the number of people who say, I don't have to move over if somebody's merging. It just gives me goosebumps when I hear people say that, because it just terrifies me to think that I'm going to merge out onto the roadway, and if I get into trouble, the person beside me wasn't going to slow down or speed up or try and help me out in any way. So failing to yield, I have the right of way. And of course, as we know, as smart drivers, you can be right or you can be dead right. Following too close, and then of course, I would say that those 2 things, failing to yield and following too close, result in the mismanagement of speed and space. As I like to say, if you are not near anything, it's less likely that you're going to hit something. People are intoxicated. I talked about drink driving and the fact that it is just as much a problem today as it was 30, 40, 50 years ago. And we have, here, at least here in the province of British Columbia and other places, we have increased police powers to try and deal with this problem. And then, of course, new drivers are facing the 4 Ds all at the same time: drinking, driving, dated, and distracted driving. You know, now we have cell phones to just add to the complexity of driving. So know that as young drivers, as new drivers, when you're 18, 19, 20 years old, that with drinking, driving, dating, distractions, you just don't have a great deal of experience. So you don't know how to focus on one thing. And this is one of the reasons why the GDL programs, the graduated driver licensing programs, put the condition in place where you can only have one other passenger in the vehicle to try and reduce distractions. And of course, 0 blood alcohol as well for most of these. And you can't have any handheld devices or electronics in the vehicle. Okay, bureaucracy, drink driving laws are changing. And then of course, the contract for life, and Corey will put that up for you. Definitely consider that. So if you're out at a party and you start drinking, or you start smoking marijuana or those types of things, you have a friend, you have a family member that you can call regardless of what time it is, and they can come and get you. And then vice versa, if they're doing the same and they give you a ring, you can go and get them and everybody can get home safely. Many of the safety features in motor cars it's increased tremendously, and we have a much higher chance of surviving traffic crashes. Also, road engineering is part of this. We have crumple zones in vehicles. We have safety glass, breakaway steering columns, safety restraints. Most of us are wearing seat belts now, and we have airbags in the vehicles. All of these automotive safety technologies are improving as well. We have crash tests to give vehicle safety ratings, and you can see those on YouTube as well, and they will give you a list of the different vehicles and their safety rating. And of course, a few years ago, it was interesting that Volvo, the company's entire marketing campaign was based on safety ratings, and that's how they sold cars, which is interesting in light of the fact that in the 1960s, when Ralph Nader released his book Unsafe at Any Speed and took aim at the Chevrolet Corvair, auto manufacturers retorted saying, oh, nobody's going to buy safety, nobody's going to pay for that. And of course, now 50 years later, it's one of the top features of a car that determines whether we're going to buy it or not. All right. The other piece of traffic crashes that keeps people alive and keeps drivers and passengers and other occupants alive is advances. And most of these advances came out of the Vietnam War in the 1960s. The golden hour, we now know that trauma, that people who sustain severe injuries as a result of a car crash, that you have 60 minutes to get them into surgery. And if you can do that, then you can keep the chances of keeping them alive are much, much higher as well. They also know that, moving them around, agitation in ambulances and in the hospitals and those types of things, all of this contributes to trauma and quality of life after they receive surgery and medical attention. So that's a quick overview of traffic crashes, the impact that it has on our society, and one of the things that you should think about. Most importantly, no one is immune to traffic crashes, and very famous people have died in traffic crashes throughout the decades. So good luck on your driver's test, and remember, pick the best answer, not necessarily the right answer. Mallory, it amazes me how some people still don't know how to use their turn signals. You know what they're doing, Mallory? They're trying to increase the resale value on their car, because if you don't use the turn signals, then the car has a higher resale value. And I'm being completely facetious. Blessed, my friend, what do you need to keep in your car? Also, glove box. Do you keep safety inspection and car registration in the car? I heard you're not supposed to. The necessities you really need. Okay, so Blessed, that's a great question. And 10 years ago, when I worked at the licensing authority here in the province of British Columbia, it would be the DOT there in Hawaii and in the United States, they were saying this, that you don't want to keep your registration and your insurance documents in the car. Well, you kind of have to. Because what happens in the unlikely event that somebody breaks into your car and they find your insurance documents, your address is on there, and they know you're not at home because they just broke into your car, so they can go to your house and they can break into your house. This is the reason that they say don't keep your insurance and your registration documents in your vehicle, because somebody could break in and they know when you're not home, and they also get your information and your other personal information. However, you are required to have proof of insurance and proof of registration in your vehicle in the event that you get pulled over by police officers. So it's kind of a catch-22. Do you, don't you? And I would say that, yeah, keep it in your vehicle. I can't say I've ever had anybody break into my vehicle and steal my insurance documents and my registration. So you have to have it in your car, because if you get pulled over, you have to present it to police officers. So it's kind of up to you. You got to weigh that decision about whether you're going to keep it in your vehicle or whether you're going to keep it at home and keep it out of your vehicle. But I might look up the Hawaii DOT and see what they say on the topic, if they have anything to say. Otherwise, keep it in your vehicle. Your Honda Fit there, Blessed, probably has a lock on it. You could lock that as well, and you can lock your vehicle. It's not likely that most people, if thieves are doing that, they are a very highly organized professional, and they're going to find your information out regardless. So that's what I have to say on that topic. Patrick, Rick, how would you go about selecting the correct lane to drive in on a mega highway with 5 or 6 lanes like the 401 through Toronto? Patrick, it depends on where's my exit? Okay. And the other thing about Toronto, Patrick, is that they usually have 3 collectors and they have 3 through lanes. So if I'm going through Toronto and I know that I'm going to be in the middle lane of the through lanes, okay? Because the right extreme lane is going to be exiting into the collector lanes, and the left lane is the passing lane. You want to get out and get past other traffic. Now, if I'm getting off, I'm going to get into the collector lanes, and again, depending on how far down I got to go to get off, I'm still going to run that middle lane, because the middle lane, if there's 3 lanes, the middle lane is going to be your best lane on a multi-lane roadway. All right, and for those of you who may or may not know, I have driven all over North America, and the 2 places that I found to be the most congested, the most challenging to drive in were Atlanta, Georgia, and Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Those were the 2 places. So know that. The Toronto can be very challenging. And when we used to drive into Toronto in the morning, there is a huge Snyder Meats sign at mile marker 299. And we said that if you were not going past that sign at 5:30 a.m. in the morning, you were going to sit in Toronto, which was another hour and a half up the road. If you weren't going past that sign at 5:30 in the morning, you were going to sit in traffic in Toronto. Bluffer, I've heard that on the Autobahn in Germany, where there is no speed limit, there is less crashes. Bluffer, I don't know any information about that. There is some rumor here. I haven't sourced this out yet. I haven't substantiated these facts, but some people are saying that they're actually beginning to put speed limits on the Autobahn. But I wouldn't be surprised if there are fewer accidents on the Autobahn than there are on other roads. I mean, here in British Columbia, they raised all the speed limits on the highways, on the Trans-Canada Highway and the Coquihalla Highway 3-4 years ago to 120 kilometers an hour, which is 62, which is 75 miles an hour. And I don't think that there has been any significant increase in traffic crashes because of that raising of the speed limit on the main highways. And it goes back to my point that a lot of traffic safety authorities are quick to jump on the bandwagon and say crashes are caused by speeding. No, they're not caused by speeding. They're caused by drivers failing to give the right of way and drivers following too close. Speeding contributes to the severity of the injuries in the crash. It doesn't cause the crash. So those are different things. And I have a great deal of trouble with that because Australian authorities are quick to jump on the bandwagon and say, oh, you need to reduce your speed to reduce crashes. That's not true. You need to manage space better. You need to have in place habits and skills that will keep you safe in the event that another driver does something goofy, because it's not a matter of if another driver is going to do something goofy. It's a matter of when they're going to do something goofy, because expecting other people and other road users and drivers on the roadway to not do something goofy is like going and watching your favorite sports team and expecting the other team not to score. Once in a while it's going to happen, but not always. The other team is almost always going to score. And more than 50% of the time, they're going to win the game. So it's the same thing as driving. For the most part, you know, the United States, most of the metropolitan areas are easily navigated because of the interstate system there. And what makes Atlanta tough to drive for your perspective? I think what happens in Atlanta, Georgia is just a huge ring road, 6 lanes of traffic. And in the afternoon, I think there's just more cars than what the interstate can handle. And you're basically sitting in traffic in the afternoon. But anybody who's driving professionally will know this, and it's part and parcel that, you know, there's rush hour in the morning going into the city and there's rush hour in the afternoon coming out of the city. So you plan your navigation and your route planning accordingly so you don't get stuck in that traffic. Blessed, what do you do if the brakes go out? Also, what if your tires blow out? What do you do in those conditions? I wouldn't know what these panics. Okay, so Blessed, excellent question about the brakes. Very high on, it's very low probability that the brakes are going to fail because the brakes are divided into 2 independent subsystems. So if the front brakes go, the back brakes will still work. If the back brakes go, the front brakes will still work. They're designed like that for a safety feature. In the unlikely event that something happens and all your brakes go, you still have the parking brake. You can use that as an emergency brake and that will get you going. The other piece that you can do if, you know, all of that fails, put the transmission into neutral and then just steer the vehicle and eventually it will slow down, because most of the time you're not going to be on a hill. It's not like in the movies where you careen down a hill, you're pumping the brake pedal, you know, with great futility. Nothing's happening. You crash into a tree and explode into a fire inferno. In real life, that usually doesn't happen. Okay. It's not like that at all. There's 2 independent subsystems. It's unlikely that the brakes are going to fail. Tire blowout, in this day and age of power steering and those types of things, most of the time you're like, oh, that's a little weird. And you're just going to pull over to the side of the road and you'll get out of the vehicle and discover that you have a flat tire. It's not like in, you know, again, it's not like in the movies in the old days and the fear that they instill in you that when you have a tire blowout, the tire blows out, the whole front of the car falls off, you know, you careen down a hill, crash into a tree and die in a fiery inferno. It's not what happens. Okay. The tire just goes flat and you just pull off the side of the road and you call AAA and they come out and fix the tire. Okay. Peace, if I read the whole driver's book, should I be ready for my test? Absolutely not. Peace, don't read the whole driver's handbook from cover to cover. It's terrible. It's written by bureaucrats, and the only thing it's really good for is curing insomnia. My counsel for study for the learner's permit is to go and find practice driving test questions here on the internet. Do it. Figure out where the holes are in your knowledge, what you don't know. Go to the driver's handbook and look up and read just those sections, and then keep doing the practice driving test questions until you're getting 80 to 90% consistently. Once you're getting 80 to 90% consistently, then you can go into the DOT or the test center and write your learner's permit. That's how you do that. And there's a whole playlist here. Corey will put that up for you, and you can have a look at that playlist, and that will help you out to study for your learner's permit. If you have something wrong with your car, definitely get the hazards on as quickly as possible. That's an excellent point of what Jaden just said. Had some issues with the buggy last week, same thing. And the one place where the buggy stopped, I drove right up on the sidewalk because there was, like my son said to me at the time, he says, why is there even a piece of sidewalk here? It was along the highway, and there's this short, like 100-yard piece of sidewalk, and I just pulled the car right up on the piece of sidewalk, put the hazards on, and then, attended to the car and whatnot. Got the car going, and same thing, it stopped along the highway. And let me tell you, where we were on the highway, there was nowhere to pull off the road. Put your hazards on, be safe, okay? Watch the traffic if you have to get out of your car, if it's broken down or those types of things. In the end, I ended up taking into the automotive technician. Was in the shop for a day or so, and it turns out that the buggy had an old remote starter on it, and that's what was causing it to shut down, because when it shut down, when the engine shut down, it was just like somebody turned the key off, and then you'd wait a little bit and then it'd start up again. And the technician, Doug, who worked on the buggy, said, he had that experience in the oil fields a few times with brand new vehicles where they had remote starters on them. The remote starter would override the engine, and then they would have to tow it 200 kilometers into the town, have it fixed, and they would figure out that it was actually the goofy electronic starter. So that's what it was on the buggy. Joe, how's the price of gas in Vernon, north of Toronto here? It hit $1.99 today. $5.85 a gallon, almost like European gas prices here. Joe, yeah, it's almost exactly the same price here. It's up $1.95, $1.96 here. Some places like in Vancouver, it's $2.16. It's just crazy how expensive fuel is. I'm a little concerned that if this continues, it's going to have an incredible impact on our economy. And yeah, I don't even want to contemplate that. Blessed, you have a blessed week as well, my friend. And if I didn't get to your question, leave a comment down in the comment section. We'll do what we can to help you out, answer your questions. Quince, if I'm going to take my test with little driving experience, what is the serious fault that I'm most likely to make? Or what's the most common serious faults that inexperienced drivers make? Quince, the biggest fault that drivers make on a driver's test is not shoulder checking. Shoulder check, shoulder check, shoulder check, okay? 2 times for every turn, every time you change direction, lane changes. Have a look at those videos and get your lane changes down for the purposes of passing your driver's test. Raise crane, I'll just answer this one and then we'll go. I've been watching Rick since I started, before I had my permit. The only person I listen to. If you study and keep up, you will be successful. Thank you again, Rick. Rain Crazed, you are most welcome, my friend. Epic, you're here as well. Don't have time, but I'll get to it. And Epic says that prices in Jersey are $4 a gallon and $5 for premium. Yeah, it's just crazy how much it is in terms of fuels. With the Smarter Driver podcast, we provide the stepping stones towards your success in driving. We empower you to achieve your goals and aspirations as they relate to getting your first license, becoming a safer, smarter driver, or starting a career as a truck or bus driver. If you're just starting out and working towards getting your first license, be sure to check out the Smarter Driver course package down in the description. Guaranteed to pass first time. As well, if there's something about driving that just really irks you and you'd like to get it off your chest, please leave a comment. I'm your host, Dr. Rick August. Thanks very much for listening. And remember, pick the best answer, not necessarily the right answer. Have a great day. Bye now.